Yeah, welcome everyone. I think everyone's moved over from the waiting room into the Tastinar for this evening. So great to have everyone on board to join us for I suppose, the official, one of the, let's say, official launches of Duncan Savage's new release, which is all very exciting. We've probably gone over a lot of this info before. It's obviously a different format, but it's what we have at our disposal at the moment. And yeah, we've on this occasion we've got the wines with us, so it's nice to be able to taste the wines. And yeah, so Duncan, we've been working with for a handful of years, and yeah, one of the great names in the wine industry in South Africa. First, having obviously started off at Cape Point with the 2003 vintage, and then obviously launching his own brand with the first of the red wines in 2011. And yeah, we've obviously noticed that each year the wines just seem to sell quicker and quicker. And I think with the particular release that actually started at 8 this morning, it was, you could probably say, unprecedented, not just from us, but for all the other people that have been lucky enough to get some of the wines. And then obviously also from Duncan Seller himself. So I think it's a great reflection of all the work that's been put in and where the brand currently sits in South Africa, which is obviously hell of exciting. Yeah, and then just from this session, we'll be recording it, so we will be able to send it to those people that can't make it. We've got a great sort of guest list. I see Remington Norman's joined us, the infamous Greg Sherwood, all the way from London, I'm sure, onto his third bottle by now. And yeah, we're looking forward to it. So Duncan will kick it off, and I'm sure I'll interrupt him at the appropriate moments and hopefully extract as much info as possible. So Duncan, how's it going down there?
How are you, DK?
Yeah, well, man, nice to have you. You've got a smile on your face. It's been a good day.
Yeah, it's been a good day, man. It's things are good. We can't complain. Things are changing. Things are, summer's coming. We can sell some vino. Happy days.
Yeah, I think that the timing's been good because obviously the lockdown's been on and off, and when do you release and all of that. So I think it's been nice from that point of view that it's actually legal to sell and deliver wine. And yeah, the timing's been good. And no, it's just nice to see your wines in the cellar. It's like a nice soothing vision as we walk in, with all these pile of boxes there, which are quickly disappearing, which is cool.
No, well, that's good. Well, I have to admit that, if lockdown was still in place, I know it's a bit tougher for you guys, but I think we would have done a little bit of smosing out the boot, eh? Tim Rand's thought that the juggernaut that is Vinnie Mark out the back of his City Golf would have done the same.
So is that your plans to go as big as Vinnie Mark?
No. It's never going to happen. It's like I can't see who's all around on the thing, but it's awesome to be here, and thanks for having me. And it's lucky to have I mean, Greg said he was going to join in that, which is great. I mean, I only know it's of Greg and Remington, so and Robin's just sent a message. So how's it to all you guys? And I hope you've all got some vino in front of you. We're gonna just take you through what I think is a pretty awesome release. It's the 19 vintage. I think has been really solid for a lot of guys. Not the biggest in terms of volume, but some really good stuff. And it's quite a lack of format because we can we can show you some of the guys. I mean, a lot of you have been to tastings on many times, and how's it, Phil? How's it going? And yeah, I think this is going to be interesting. I don't know how to respond like on any of the messages. So
yeah, just maybe don't engage in the beginning. Huh? I can see all your mates are going to be logging on. So maybe take it away with your picturesque view outside the cellar here.
Yeah, so this is the Salt River, better known as the Salt Riviera. It's we had to wait for a specific day on that. Well, we first had to clean the litter off the streets and have a couple of the homeless people that sleep on the right-hand side there just to move over just for a sec so we could take the photo to make it look slightly more attractive. We actually, as a matter of interest, we had a little accident in the winery. We had a barrel stack, a rack broke, and a barrel shifted in position that was sitting very close to a food row. And in that food row, we had an experimental whole bunch Cinsault from the Pekingese Kloof. So fortunately, it wasn't follow the line. But the barrel didn't damage the food row. It just touched the valve enough to break the seal of one of the doors. And I mean, it's like when you're 20 years old and you break the seal down at the local pub, that thing just went all the way. We had 2,000 liters of Pekingese Cliff Sinso run down the road. So on the left-hand side, it ran down, because we don't have drains in the cellar. It ran down the left-hand side of the road here, and the homeless guys sleep on the right-hand side, and not one of them woke up and enjoyed the spoils of the Sinso River running down Salt River.
It was probably a good thing.
I can laugh about it now, but we didn't laugh at the time, I have to admit. But it's pretty epic place. I mean, Salt River, it's epic and it's dodgy at the same time. I mean, the cool thing is we moved from, thanks Christine, we moved from, you know, this dodgy exterior, those have been there before, to, you know, you could be in a little barrel cellar in the middle of anywhere in the world. You know, the place has got character. And the nice thing I liked about this specific building is, fortunately for me, it was already started off by a guy called Tim Martin, who had the foresight to invest in the place, which was cool. And then we just fell in love. I mean, you can see, obviously, it's a building that's probably about 60, 70 years old. So it's got a bit of character. It's got its quirks. It's got its interesting little ways about it. But it's a super cool little production facility. At the end of the day, a cellar is a cellar. So it is what it is.
Who put this slide in? But anyway, carry on.
So one of the you know, there's been a lot of hype about Volgat over the years and places like Test Kitchen. But hot on their trails is a place called Continental Fisheries. And this is one of their finest offerings. If you haven't been to Salt River and had a Gatsby, then you're missing out on something in life. This we can feed 4 of this for $200. No, this is 120. It's a good substitute for the Test Kitchen. No, it's crazy.
I was gonna say, I'm wondering how many staff members you've lost after they've consumed that. But anyway.
No, we have Gatsby Friday, man. It's a problem for your waistline, but it's interesting nonetheless. So we want to do, I mean, Gatsby's are just a bit of fun, and it's actually quite an interesting part of you know, Cape Town and the culture in Cape Town. You know, a lot of guys don't venture to some of these places that look super dodgy, but you can find some interesting things. So this is just obviously a bit of a layout of where we're all based. It gives you a bit of an idea of the spread of our vineyards and why we do 60,000 Ks a year in the Bucky. You know, we've got anything from Malgas across up into the Pekingese Kloof. So you can see Malgas down at the bottom right, and then going through the traditional areas, Valiesdorp, Franschhoek, Paul, Stellenbosch. That little one down the bottom there next to what's Constantia is, obviously it's not in Constantia, it's Fischhoek essentially. That's the girl next door down at the bottom. How's it, Renzi? Down at the bottom, and then up into Darling on the left-hand side there, and then going up into the Pekingese Kloof. And it's actually quite a nice snapshot of well, I mean, it's a shotgun approach really to the Western Cape. I mean, but we've tried to pick as interesting terroirs as possible, and suited to the specific varieties. And as we go through the whole thing, we'll show you. We got some cool photos of the different sites. So starting the first photo of the next one is the little pin there that's close to Valiesdorp, and this is a place called Kaimansgat, which belongs to a guy called Johan Rupert, who's quite well known in this neck of the woods. Obviously, I think everyone knows who Johan is. Johan's got a bit of rands to throw around, so he's got a nice little piece of ground there in Kaimansgat. You know, all the other oaks farm with apples because they're making so much money. I think Johan's all right, so he can afford to farm with grapes. And he's been super cool. He's allowed me to purchase a bit of fruit from the property. So this is Sauvignon grown in Kaimansgat. We haven't had some weird sort of weather event that's caused no leaves around the bunches. We do that on purpose, just to break down pyrazine in the Sauvignon. You know, Renzi was just saying he was drinking a 2017 Savage White. You know, we want the wine to be all about texture, you know, rather than just those sort of tropical upfront characters that Sauvignon is known from. And in particular, we don't want any green. So you can see this is just now a close-up. You know, we want to pick golden Sauvignon bunches. I mean, it really looks beautiful. But almost when you pick the bunches, you'll see in the next slide, there's a whole lot of bunches in the crates. And it doesn't look like Sauvignon almost. It almost looks more like Chenin. But this is just the quality we get out of Kaimansgat. A beautiful place with massive acidities in the wine. You know, it's just really, really fantastic. So with the Savage White, Derek's got a bit of the 2019 in front of him. I know that, I was Greg, I know that a lot of you guys haven't, well, you won't have the wines. The label's a wealth of information, as Derek will show you. You probably can't even read the name on it on the screen, but anyway, it's, you can't actually. Now, listen, the Savage White, it's, as I say, it's more a textural take on the varieties. And I think that Sauvignon, I've said to a lot of people, I think that Sauvignon is a bit of it's an opportunity in South Africa at the moment. You know, we've got such a wealth of beautiful old Chenin vineyards. And I mean, we make a Chenin in the form of Never Been Asked to Dance. But being able to play around with Sauvignon as a variety that I cut my teeth on at my time in Cape Point. I mean, Derek mentioned, most of you know, I had a lacquer stint there, which was awesome. And it's cool, man. We've got lots of acidity in the variety. We can play around with it. I mean, Derek's better half his family is known for a bit of the good stuff, and it just shows what you can actually do with a variety. So I think, again, you know, if you've bought Savage White over the last couple of years, from 17 through, let's say 17, 18, and 19. 17 is very textural, very much like the 19. I think the 19 is quite rich, quite powerful. It's also a bigger sort of style, where 18 was a little leaner, a little bit more restrained, shows a little bit more of the acidity. You know, that's, I think, the style of the wine and what the vineyard does. You know, even with ripeness, we can get freshness, we can get acidity that just kind of reigns the whole package in and just gives it that freshness that we need, and obviously an accompaniment to food, because it's not a white wine that you're gonna, on a 35-degree day in Joburg on the deck chair, you know, crack a couple of bottles around the pool. It's looking for a nice meal to be paired with, I think, which makes a big difference.
Duncan, just one quick thing on the white before we go into the next one. What's because it never used to always have the Chenin in, if I'm not mistaken. So what, if I'm correct there, what was the thinking there to starting to add a bit of Chenin, or maybe you always added it and it just wasn't on the label?
Bit of the creative paperwork in the cellar. No, we actually started for the first vintage in 2015, and it kind of had a relevance to the story of Never Been Asked to Dance, because, as I've told most of you before, Never Been Asked to Dance was this little claret vineyard in Villiersdorp that had, in 54 years, never gone into a bottle or a barrel. And when I heard that story, I thought, we've got to do something with this vineyard. And I mean, I'm telling you about claret, and there's no claret anywhere near this wine. But the thing that happened was that little vineyard spurred us on to try and do interesting things and find interesting varieties. So we made a barrel of claret, and then when the farmer promptly ripped the vineyard out to plant apples, I mean, it was just, he sort of led me down the garden path for a couple of years. And then I understand, I mean, it's financial decisions. You need to make some cash, plant some apples. And as a result, that vineyard bit the dust, and we had one vintage in barrel. And instead of bottling it on its own as a one-off, we decided to blend it into am I supposed to be seeing this? Oh, shit. Sorry, hang on. Something's popped up on my screen here. I don't know what's going on. Let me just get rid of that. You guys still there?
Are we still there? You can carry on chatting with the screen.
No, I don't know what's going on. Something's doing funny things here. Okay, cool. So no, we lost our claret, unfortunately, but we blended it into the Savage White 2015, and we just liked the way the texture came into play. And then that year we had started experimenting with Chenins from Malchus. You know, David's such a lacquer oak, and he helped us just find these interesting wines and you know, on his Malchus property, which was cool. And we started playing around, and we just really liked the texture that those varieties brought to the blend. Obviously, the claret, you know, we couldn't work with that any further, and that was going to be a wine on its own in the form of Never Been Asked to Dance. But then Never Been Asked to Dance ended up becoming that beautiful old 64-year-old vineyard in Paul. And it was just really cool how the whole thing sort of evolved. And we also went through a phase, you know, where everyone talks about a Bordeaux red, a Bordeaux white, a Rhone style red, and we had this little moment where we thought, you know, we don't want to be categorized as a Rhone style red or a Bordeaux style white. So we thought if we threw some Chenin in, it would make a difference. Not, you know, we just kind of not throw Chenin in, if you know what I mean, but kind of added into the blend to make it classically South African. We like the textual element, but we like Sauvignon to take the lead. And if you look at the 2019, you know, there's 2/3 Sauvignon in the wine, and I think it really just, you get that textural yellow fruit element that you would generally have with the Chenins. But you just bring that sort of, and ripe Sauvignon, but you bring that bit of black currant leaf into the wine, which I think is just fantastic, without any oak influence in that, which makes a difference.
Oh, cool.
So the next shot you've got on the screen is good old Follow the Line, and I saw someone's drinking a bottle of 2015 Follow the Line that popped up on the screen. It's such an amazing vineyard for us. It's actually it's quite crazy in many ways, because the whole story, as many of you know, where Butti told me to follow the fucking telephone line. Excuse my language. I don't know if I can be allowed to swear on Zoom, or if Mark Zuckerberg and his like get into trouble. But you know, the thing is with the telephone line's gone. These oaks took the telephone line down. I don't know whether someone stole the cables or what, but
I didn't know.
yeah, the farmer, I didn't know it until the other day as well. I went in there and the bloody telephone line's gone.
I was going to say you probably got lost then, because he told you to follow the lines, so you didn't know how to get back.
I was always going to try and find that recopy pinotage. That's lurking in the depths of that place.
Well, I think that I don't know if the next slide is Butti in the slide, the next one. I can't remember.
In a couple of so this is the photo you've got there is the previous photo, obviously just a one in the season where we've got some foliage on the vines. And what's really cool about this photo, obviously around budding time, it kind of shows you, I've always talked about how the southeaster looks like it's blowing these vines up the hill. So you can kind of, they're almost crawling up the hill. And if you look here, you can see this is typical of what happened in the old days. There was a lot of cinsaut planted, as you guys know. This farm had a massive abundance of cinsaut, and all of it was taken out except for 2 vineyards. This one and a small little parcel that's made by Peter Valser. And Peter Valser's parcel is the oldest cinsaut in Darling. But this vineyard, you can see if you look at the length of the arms. I mean, you can see the way the guys used to farm in the old days. It was production based. So the guys pruned longer canes in order to get more fruit, and we've ended up building up out of the ground. And a lot of what happens is, sometimes the worst thing that can happen to these old vineyards is winemakers getting involved, because guys come in and they try and overthink it, and they sucker the living daylights out of these poor vines, so that you end up with these little bushy tops on the ends of those arms. And you can imagine it's top heavy. If you've got too much fruit, if you're in a place with lots of southeaster, it becomes a huge problem. So we've started, you can't see it in this photo, but we have a new philosophy, which is bring back the bush. And we do a lot of work with, water shoots around the vines, coming out the bottom, just to be able to kind of form a bush again and get especially some canopy on the southeast side of the vines, and just create a more balanced vine. So if you go to the next slide, Christine, I think we can, that's going through the vineyard in harvest time. So you can see there we'd only just really started the project, but you can see the canopy is not massive. And that's some beautiful, beautiful cinsaut. This was the 2017 vintage, standing on the back of the trailer. It was the last time that I stood on a trailer with our Butti before he passed away. But it's a pretty epic place. And I mean, look at those bunches. It's beautiful, beautiful cinsaut. Made a beautiful wine in 2017. So those of you have got it. So that's Butti there. Butti liked his chops, as you can see, but he's a bloody legend. He was a legend, and he still is a legend in our minds. He became an abrasive character in the beginning that became a great mate, and it's quite sad. But we had a good time together, and we'll have fond memories of those times, and work with a lack of vineyard in his memory, which is cool.
Well, Duncan, you remember you've got lots of memories with Butti. I've got one memory, and that was when you took me to his farm. And I remember it was about 40 degrees in Darling, and we went to visit Butti, and you had built him up, and he certainly lived up to the reputation, because I think within half an hour we were in his garage tasting his home brew of Ruby Cabernet from a petrol drum. And then it was followed by some moonshine, and needless to say, it didn't fix my flu, but it was a memory that's burnt in the back of my brain, that's for sure.
The visit to those oaks, when you deal with these lacquer farmers, I always say you meet these amazing South Africans. We've got such lacquer people in this country, and it's you go and carry these oaks, and you pop in to look at a vineyard and do a little bit of work in the canopy or whatever, or even in harvest, you pop in to taste a few grapes, and that eventually ends up in you braai a piece of boerie, have a quick beer, which becomes a bottle of wine, and before you know, you're sleeping over. But that's lekker, because it's like a gesellig, and it's good people, man. I'm glad you had a chance to meet Butti before he passed on.
No, it's special. Yeah.
Yeah. So we also managed to find a picture of Derek in his heyday. This was when Derek used to live back in Cape Town, his little property in Elgin. Derek loved his little tractor. You know, he's got a body for it, which is fantastic.
That is so childish, but yeah, I remember those days fondly. Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to scorch people's brains, so just go on to the next one there, Christine. That's cool. So this, I wanted to include this photo because, you know, it's Alan. Alan's, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have had dealings with Alan Mullins over the years. One of the things I said to Derek, which is cool, and I've said at so many tastings in the past, is the general sort of feeling of I don't know, just like the people in the wine industry are lacquer people. There's a lot of lacquer people, and one of the most awesome of them all is a guy called Alan Mullins. And Alan is, you know, this was just a cool story because we always wanted to get Alan in the water. And I've told so many people about this, and no one ever believes me when I said, whenever Alan got into the water, ladies in bikinis just appeared. And I don't know how this happened, but as you can see from the photo, it happened. So we were at Muizenberg this day. This is Al's very first surf. We've subsequently bought him a board, which is a smaller board. I mean, Alan's now into his 70s. This was a good couple of years ago. And we got Alan down there. You can see, I mean, it's the crew in the water there. There's myself, there's Gordy, who works with the Newton-Johnson brothers, obviously, that work with Great Domains too. You've got Peter Volser there, Trezan Barnard, and everyone's in wetsuits because the water's pretty cold. But these ladies in the bikinis thought that this was fantastic. And Alan couldn't wipe the smile off his face for quite some time after that little session, I have to say. He got some good waves and it was good fun. So it's good guys getting together, which is quite cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, from there on to the next slide, Dunks, it's actually very cool just to put Alan in there and chat about it. I mean, I think one of the other people that gets spoken about a lot, and even more recently, and I know she had an influence on you, which some people might not be aware of in terms of when and what happened, was obviously Rosa. And then now suddenly seeing that little old vine in the next slide, where did Rosa fit in with you in terms of your journey so far? How did you get involved there?
Yeah, she's an amazing human being. We worked together at Cape Point. I mean, I rocked up at Cape Point, knew nothing, just knew that I was super chuffed because I was getting a job next to the sea, and obviously wanted to make wine, which is going to be cool. And you know, you leave Elsenburg and you come out of there as a winemaker. You don't know anything about vines. I mean, some guys did because they'd maybe farmed with vines in the past. And then you know, getting to meet Rosa, she worked there for a year, and she's a tough Tony that day. She's awesome. She knows how to deal with staff. She's passionate about vines. And for a guy like myself coming into the industry at that time, you need to have someone that gives you a little bit of guides you a little bit down the vineyard path, because I mean, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. And if I look at like now, what we do as a business, I mean, this year we're spending on other people's land, we're spending 50 grand a hectare just on mulch and compost. I mean, it's a huge investment in other people's pieces of ground, which is a bit of a risky sort of scenario, but if we want to make the wines better, we need to do that. And it's, you know, you can get stuck into the winery and you can, you know, polish the floor 10 times and do whatever you need to do. But at the end of the day, you see the best results through grafting in the vineyards. And I mean, this picture of this vine here, this is Never Been Asked to Dance. Beautiful 64-year-old Shannon. This is one of the prettier vines. There's some that are not as pretty, but there's also quite a few gaps in the vineyard. And I mean, a third of this vineyard is dead. So, I mean, yeah, Ren's the 05 there. Ooh, that was a killer. If you look at, you know, these vines, we kind of nursed this vineyard back from, it was again a place where a lot of guys had made wine. You know, as I said, this was anything but Never Been Asked to Dance. This has been through a couple of winemakers. The block's looking a bit tired, but it just needed a bit of new life. And in fact, the irony is it didn't need someone to come in with doing anything too fancy or trying to sucker too much. It just needed a bit of compost, a little bit of love, and not too much handling. I think this vineyard, you know, as I said, we've stepped back a little bit when it comes to suckering. We've rather opened the canopies up, breaking a bit of leaves more. And it's been amazing just to see how much results we've had in taking it from half a ton a hectare, because it's a 1 hectare block, to 3.5 tons in the space of 3 years. and replanting. So we replanted all the dead vines. It'll still be Shannon at the block. We've kept it at sort of between 85 and 90% Shannon. We planted a lot of Petit Manseng, Picpoul, a little bit of Semillon, a couple of other things in there, which is really cool. So we kind of, you know, it's obviously a long time away, but it's good fun to have a crack at that stuff. So yeah, Derek, I mean, Rissa is a legend. She's a super awesome lady. Yeah, in this photo, you can see we part of our input program, as they say in Afrikaans, or vine replacement. It's not selection masal, unfortunately. These are vines we've got from our local nursery, but it's quite a challenge getting these vines to develop in the ground and to form part of that vineyard that you're introducing them to, because you know you've got these old girls at 64 that have been around for a while. They don't really take to these new vines. You know, there's a lot of competition. They're fighting kind of for the nutrients, for the moisture. But if we don't do this on a yearly basis and try and bring these in and rejuvenate these vineyards, then we dead in the water. Because, you know, if you think about the current situation, I mean, let's face it, guys aren't going to be planting huge amounts more vineyards in the near future. There's a lot of vineyards that are going to be coming out the ground, in fact. So to rejuvenate these old blocks is super important. So we have them in many years to come. And that's another, obviously, initiative Derek at Rissa and them did was with the old vine concept. I mean, you know, trying to promote, you know, vineyards just that guys don't pull these things out, which is brilliant.
No, well, that's the back, and without going back to that slide, Christine, it's not necessary. That old vine and all this potential of finding and the awesomeness of finding these places. I remember you might have even said it to me. Originally, the plan was one white, one red at Savage. And now there's obviously the range that you've got, which is awesome. And obviously, it was one of those things, I assume, when you come across these amazing parcels, you're like, shit, I've got to actually do something with it. So how do you almost stop eventually to say, okay, the range is where it is and you're happy, or is there still on the horizon potentially something that if it comes across your path, you might consider it, or how do you go about that?
No, listen, I think we need to can it now. It's eight is enough. I know where you're heading with it. So there's the subtle hint. I can take it. No, look, we had 6 this year because of the birds. It was a bit of a problem. But, you know, that's the emotional side of this game. I mean, it's you find an interesting vineyard or you do something. I mean, you look at all the guys. I mean, from Eben to Butch to everyone. You know, also, I mean, you moan at me. Go and have a chat to Spooky.
No, I wasn't moaning. I think the range is perfect. It was more. I wasn't actually having a go.
That's the legend, though. He's it's how's it end? It's no, listen. It's the thing is with those vineyards, you know, if you find something interesting, then it's. But you must remember, a lot of people think we've just gone through and looked for random vineyards all the time and then put them into a bottle. When we started with Savage Red, we were using this Grenache. We were using Follow the Line, Cinsault in the wine. We started playing around with David's Touriga. So we were working with those vineyards already, and they were all kind of heading into one wine. And then as the business evolved and the desire, you know, the emotional element kicks in. You know, you want single site wines, and you want to be able to showcase it. You can't speak about the Pekingese Kloof if it's 30% of a wine. So this photo over here is the Pekingese Kloof. And this is, it's a pretty epic place. You remember we went up there, you were feeling a bit poorly.
That was the breakfast skortel on the top there.
Yeah, yes. I didn't know Derek that well at the time. And I thought I had to like impress the soak to try and sell him some vino. But now that I know what I know, we should just go to the barn at a door. No, listen, it was lekker, man. We had a skortel bra on the top there. If any of you ever come down to the Cape and you want to hit the road with me, you come and check out this place. There's a lookout point overlooking the Swartland, and you know you look down to the sea on the right, and you look back over what is, I mean, it's a real peach of a country. It's we live in paradise, and when you stand up there, you know we all moan about the problems, but when you stand up there, you forget about them quickly. Now it's an incredible place, and it's I mean, obviously the Pekingese Kloof is very much known for its rooibos and stone fruit, citrus, all those kinds of things. But it just, Grenache is fantastic. So that's the next slide that Christine's just brought up. That's a 44-year-old Grenache vine on its own roots in the Pekingese Kloof. It's an incredible vineyard. It's actually quite interesting because the vineyard's got quite a lot of vigor considering its age, and it's trying to balance that. And with the drought, we haven't seen a huge amount of difference in the canopies. We've just kind of seen a shedding of fruit. So Thief in the Night's supposed to be kind of like 70-80% Grenache. That was the initial plan when we started out, and it's always hovered around 50, now into the 60s. And we can kind of like see the blend is dictated by the weather, because we pick the same portion every year. We've got 4 rows in that block. It's the same 4 rows every year. And it kind of like, you know, until we start getting back into that production cycle in the vines, it'll be sort of 50-60%. But I reckon from next year, I mean, we've had a good bit of rain this year. The crop in 2020 was solidish. It's heading in the right direction. You know, so something that's interesting is obviously everyone reckons, like a lot of our vineyards, a third of what we're farming now is organic. You can see if you look here, there's a bit of scorched earth policy going on here. So there's a little bit of Roundup that kissed the soil here. But you know, these are the way a lot of these vineyards have been farmed for years. So like a lot of people think you just flip the switch and you turn something organic. It's not something which you can just do overnight. So we've got a 10-year plan, which it's now we 2 years into it, where we're starting to work on obviously through all the composting and mulching we're doing. We haven't done it in this vineyard, but what we've been doing is going back to, I've told some of you before, the old Fleckvoort thing. You know, the old generations, they didn't just pick up their phone and order stuff in a bag that got delivered, and they just hoy it on the ground and off they go. You know, here the older guys, I mean, Friedadal, where Follow the Line comes from, they were farming with Roundup over the years there, but they were farming with a Fleckvoort. So if you farm with a Fleckvoort or a furrow every second row, putting all the prunings into the ground, and then with compost, you know, inevitably the guys would have some cattle on the farm, and you'd have some compost of whatever description going into the soil. So you kind of were compensating by you know, spraying the surface, but then putting something back into the actual soil profile. So, you know, putting carbon back into the soil. What happens a lot now is the guys just, you know, throw a couple of pellets, and it looks good because it lies on the ground, but it dries out and doesn't do a hell of a lot. So our drive is to try and go back to a lot of the older ways of farming. I think the old oaks, you know, it's amazing. We looked at one of our sites that was planted pre any like infrared photos and all that. And this guy who planted this vineyard, he planted it. If you look at Jaco Engelbrecht, who consults me in the vineyards, he's such a lekker oak. He does all this technology stuff that I don't understand, with these drones and the satellites and all this funny business. But he checks out this the solar radiation, all that. And if you look at the way that how it changes within that block, is how these oaks planted it. And they didn't know that stuff. They just knew their farms, and they knew how to like farm and do their stuff. It's amazing, amazing. When you think about it, it's incredible. But I mean, these oak vines.
Duncan,
just asking about some very of Grenache. It's Remington. It's not. It's actually quite funny. When I started my career, we were making Sauvignon and working ultra reductively on Sauvignon and very oxidatively on reds. And then we quickly realized that if you pick Sauvignon ripe, it's actually quite bulletproof, and you don't really need to, if you're not chasing the thiols and all those fancy pants flavors that the guys want in their everyday style of Sauvignon. You know, we realized that we started going more oxidative on the whites and less oxidative on the reds. And now we're at a point now, especially with something like Grenache, we work very carefully. You know, we kind of handle it, you know, we work with a lot of inert gas, CO2 and nitrogen, just to protect the fruit. And then also just, you know, the ferments are fairly small, you know, so we're not generating massive amounts of heat and energy. And as a result, we don't get this excessive extraction. Once the ferment's on the go, it's all good. We don't do any cold soaking or anything. We haven't been able to afford a cooling system yet. So we have to just make do as we go. And then we just leave them be on the skins until they dry and press them off depending on how they taste. I mean, the interesting thing, we had COVID. We didn't know what was going to happen because everyone sort of got a bit scared at the time, and we thought we had all these wines on skins sitting in the cellar. I mean, you know, 3/4 of our production was still on skins when they said that we were going to not be allowed to go into the winery. And so what we did, the stuff we had pressed off, we filled up the foudre that were on skins and just left them, so that if the shit hit the fan and we couldn't get to the winery, we'd kind of still be all right and we wouldn't lose the crop. And in the end, we were allowed to go, but we had now filled the bloody things up. So we thought, well, what the hell? So I phoned Artie. So Artie said to me, no, Duncan, anything up to a year is fine. But I know Artie's done some really interesting stuff with skins ferments and aging time on skins. But we left the stuff for 3 months this year, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, is it the right thing to do every year? I don't know. I don't know. There's always good things that come out of these dodgy situations that happen. So that's a little bit of Rooibos. I thought I got to include a photo of Rooibos. If you haven't seen Rooibos as a bossy, those little bossies made a lot of oaks, a lot of cash over a period of time. And they made a lot of guys very little cash for a long time. And all of a sudden now, you know, there's been an increase in the price of Rooibos. Artie even grew some of his own Rooibos, which is quite cool. And it's a really like a local thing to support.
Yeah, Duncan, just quickly on that skin contact, you'd probably enjoy. I don't know if I've ever told you, but in terms of skin contact, when Artie and Eben and myself were in the Jura, and we had a tasting there with the winemaker who couldn't speak a word of English, and we were trying to find out a bit of information, and Charlotte was doing some translating. And one of the questions that Artie asked was how long had that particular wine spent on skins? And when the answer came back 191 days, he thought that the translation couldn't have been correct. It couldn't have been 191. And anyway, the point was that this winemaker from Lucy and Aviet, he literally gave the answer that you just gave, and he said his father taught him that the wine needs to taste and smell like X at that particular stage, and he didn't get to that point. And he said he just waited until he got to that smell and taste, and that happened to be after 191 days, and the wine had no extraction. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's actually super cool. I don't know if it'd be interesting to chat to Remington about like the sulfuring regimes and stuff. I mean, that's like crazy stuff one doesn't want to talk about now, but I mean, it's like, you know, the way we all sort of throw in sulfur so early and stuff, but if you kind of leave these things be, it's amazing what the leaf does and how it looks after the wines. Anyway, that's like boring stuff. So the photo, the next slide that's up is a good bit of, you know, Not Tonight Josephine. And Not Tonight Josephine, the 18 was the first one we did. And this was exactly, Derek York, this was now one of those impulse decisions. This is why people don't make money in the wine industry, because we do stupid stuff like this. But I was in a vineyard, but it's stupid stuff that tastes lacquer. So it's you know, we were in the vineyard. If you look at this photo, it's like this unassuming flat vineyard in the foreground. It's the lowest part of a farm called Tiruk, which is at 770 meters above sea level. And it's just an epic place. And I said to the owner, Shelley, I said, you know, can we not use these drying racks or something? Because they weren't using them at the time. And we popped some of the Shannon on there. She said to me, no worries. I said, I want Shannon low lying. So it's not even this like romantic old Shannon vineyard that's all fancy pants and what have you. It's a trellised vineyard on the lowest point of the farm in fairly alluvial sort of sandy soils. And we picked this stuff with a monster acidity. It comes in at sort of, you know, flavor ripeness, but with huge acidity as you would get in that sort of environment. And then we chuck it on there and dry it out. And occasionally a really good thing comes out. 2018 is epic. 2019 we're not even releasing because it just wouldn't stop fermenting. So we've got a sweet wine with 280 grams of sugar and 17 alcohol. So Renzi and I have got a plan for that. We're going to squirt the living daylights out of it and make some moonshine. I hope your plan's going to work, Renz. Otherwise we're going to have problems. But it's there. We've got a 250 liters of the stuff. And then we made the 2020. It was interesting because the 2019, the season just was weird. The grapes didn't dry out. They just didn't look like they were drying out. It was super weird. And then with the 2020 again, it felt normal. And the 2020 is been fantastic. It was probably a little bit riper than we anticipated. So we've got a couple of demijohns of basically syrup. But it's such a lekker wine. It's just beautiful. We just put them in barrel and we walk away. And we do them on skins for a while, get a bit of foot trotting going on, and that's the thing. You tick on the next slide there. I don't even know what I can't remember what the next slide is, to be honest. I'm looking at a screen that's telling me that something's about to like explode on this computer. So let's just hope it doesn't happen. Christine, are you there? Ah, the Royal Family Sedan. Here we go. Now this was we were walking through Sweden, and I couldn't resist taking a photo of Donovan's family sedan. You know, now that he's added another kid to the mix, I would pay money to see the Roll family get into this car. But it was quite interesting. I don't know where these folks found this thing, but it was a pretty cool photo anyway. You can tick onto the next one there. This was at this photo was taken at Cape Point, which was just where we started with the whole amphora thing. I thought it's quite cool to show this because we talk about the amphora so many times, but not a lot of people actually end up seeing them. And these were old some of Yogi's finest pots. I think the one he's made us now, which is sitting in the cellar at Savage, is I honestly believe his best pot to date. But it's just beautiful, all hand thrown on a wheel. You can imagine when this oak is how incredible. He's pulling those things up on a wheel, and only really gets it right after joint number 2, but somehow about 5 cups of coffee, but somehow just gets those things sorted out and beautiful. And it's all about the terroir. You have a skill as a potter that comes, someone that comes in with his skills in terms of making, forming that pot. But it's all about the terroir, the clay. I mean, if you look at what Yogs, the amount of the ups and downs he's had, those used to leak marginally. We used to get a mild crystallization on the outside of the pots. And then Yogs went to another source of clay, which was a problem. It was like, you'd get a lot of leaking. And then the clay we've got now, it's almost so dense, it's like aging the wine in a massive glass demijohn. So it all just depends, and it's all just terroir based. So that's the pot that's now in the cellar at Savage Wines. 658 liters of pure Yogi magic. And it's just a pretty epic pot, So it's not doing much to the wines. It's a pretty reductive vessel in many ways. Some of the pots in the past, as I said, have been very oxidative. This particular pot is actually very reductive. So it's quite interesting to kind of see the dynamic. And we also ventured, we've always done whites in the pots, but to venture onto a bit of red is also quite cool to see what happens. So that's a little wine we do for the Cape Winemakers Guild. And it's the only Swartland vineyard we work with still. It's a little property called, well, not so little, it's a property called Jakkelsfontein, and there's a little bit of Syrah down the bottom of these contours. Some middle-aged bush vines which happen to make quite a tidy little wine. Yeah, so this has no relevance to the presentation. It's good old Sebastian Beaumont, who's a proper legend. He's not even part of the Great Domains portfolio, but all work and no play makes us dull human beings. So this was taken, this is one of the things, a bunch of oaks in the industry. This is the kind of stuff we live for. I mean, we live to drink great wine and surf cool waves. But this was we had you can't go on a surf trip and not have a bribe recce. And the only reason why Sebastian was doing these bribe recces is because Miles Morsop and I couldn't figure out how to change the tire on the Land Rover. And I promise you the Land Rover hadn't broken down. It was actually just a puncture. But we couldn't for love or money get that bloody wheel off until we read the manual. So Sebastian had time to make a whole bunch of bribe recces and stuff. So taken on the beach up near a place called Kleinzia, right on the sea, in a pretty epic place there. They've mined the crap out of it, but it's beautiful from a surf point of view. So this is the girl next door. I try to get a photo of the vineyard that shows the ocean a little bit closer, and it's unfortunate that it doesn't quite do it justice. But the vineyard it's in Fishhook. It's technically Sun Valley, I suppose you could say, but Fishhook does sound a little better than Sun Valley. And it's just an epic place. Planted, as I've told many of you in the past, in a property development. It's 0.38 of a hectare. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys listening might be in property development. It's the same, there's lots of smoke and mirrors in selling wine. We try and, with the same with property. This was the case of an estate where the oaks laid out the plots and called the roads. You live on Merlot or Sauvignon Avenue or something along those lines. And then they slap a little bit of extra cash on the plot, plant a few olives, plant a vineyard, and then walk away. And this thing looked like shit. It was just this rundown little weed patch. And we took it on a bit of risk, and it's a vineyard now that I've got a long-term lease on. And we've been farming this vineyard now for the last couple of years, since 2000. When did we start? First wine was 2014, so we started the year before that. And the 14 and 15, we had to pick a little bit early. The birds nailed us. You can imagine in a property development, every single person that sees a bird puts a bird feeder out. So it won't go down too well if I whip a shotgun out and start shooting some of those little fuckers, excuse my language. But they've been creating a huge amount of trouble for me and costing me a lot of crop in both Girl Next Door and Never Been Asked to Dance. But I have included a photo a little bit later on of the netting we do these days. But our big challenge here has been to try and get crop. You know, everyone's been trying to order a couple of bottles of Girl Next Door and generally not been very successful because there's just so little of it. So this vineyard gets absolutely clapped by the wind, as you can imagine. We had municipal water there, which we obviously can't use. We'd get into a spot of bother if we turned the taps on. So what we've had to do now is we've had to mulch. You can see a bit of the mulch on the ground there, but if you want to click onto the next slide, Christine, then you can see what we're up to now. This is the project that we're busy with in most of the vineyards that we work with. So this is our quest to go. This vineyard is already farmed organically. It's there underneath that mulch is a hell of a lot of compost, and we just basically weaning these. Well, not weaning. We stop the water altogether. And it's amazing the difference. So if you look at the Girl Next Door over the last couple of years, so 2017, there was, as I say, 2014 and 15 were a little bit lighter in style, picked a bit early, just because of the dynamic, I think, of a vineyard that was struggling and birds that were nailing it. And then the 2016 we didn't produce. 2017 was absolutely epic. I don't know if any of you have got the 17, but I've only got 5 bottles of my own. So if any of you want to part with it, please give me a call. But it's pretty amazing. It was very spicy, you know, quite a lean, a great expression of Syrah that's grown next to the ocean. And then the 2018, some of you will have the 18. That was a little bit different in that it still shows that salty mineral element of what a maritime Syrah vineyard should show. But it's got quite a bit of savoriness to it. You know, with the weaning of water, we had the canopies drop like half the size, a lot more savory elements in the wine, more black olive, fynbos. And then moving on to the 19, which I hope most of you get some. The 19's got all that sort of savory element of the wine, but then with this beautiful perfume that you expect of cool climate Syrah. And I think it's definitely the finest expression of this vineyard to date. So in this shot,
Duncan, just sorry, quickly, Christine, can you just go back to that other pic very quick? That middle sort of row, is that a row that you would have planted when you took it over? Because obviously I'm just looking at the thickness of the stumps on the left and the right. What's happening there?
Yeah, so the vineyard, the vines on the left are 13 years old, and the vines on the right are only 5. Well,
okay, so you just went in the middle. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was a stupid idea. If I knew what I knew then, now I wouldn't have done it because it doesn't work. But it's we're trying. We're not. I'm now determined. I'm not throwing in the towel on this. It's cost me enough cash already. So it's this is a bottomless pit vineyard actually. I mean, we don't really make a lot of money with this wine. It's the amount of effort that goes into making this thing survive where it does. But it's just what makes it so rewarding. You know, it's this constant like carrot. You've got this picture in your mind of where you want it to be, and you never get there. You know, so you're just chasing this little thing the whole time. But these vines, these young vines now, with the amount of compost and mulch, if you think that looks like a lot of mulch, you must see what it looks like now. Double that with all this compost underneath there. If they don't grow now, they're never going to grow, and then we'll come with another plan. But you know, you don't want to. We came to the situation here where we didn't want to rip these vines out that were there. You know, they've weathered the storm. They've looked like shit for years. They're suddenly looking quite good now, and I think they're going to offer something. You know, we've given them another lease on life, so hopefully they're going to offer us something special. And I think they have already in the 19. You know, the other wines are beautiful. I think the 19 is just really where this vineyard's starting to come into its own. It'll be super chuffed. If you look at this, the next slide, you can see it doesn't look like much here, but we've got the white net on the outside, and underneath that, if you look closely, you can see these little black marks on the leaves. We've got these little, if anyone knows how to kill little red-winged starlings without neighbors complaining, please let me know. I shouldn't say that on a public forum, but those things are as clever as all hell. They do huge damage to vineyards. Once they get in the nets, they inevitably die because they get stuck there, but they have a massive party. It's like you've been told you've been unleashed on a bar somewhere, and you've told this is the last chance you'll get to drink and party. That's basically their mindset once they get into these nets. And if you're 18 years old, you know, so these guys get in there and they just decimate that stuff. They don't eat the grapes, they just pick everything, and then everything starts to rot. So we double net this vineyard. We've got a small black hold net on the inside, which we put around the bunchstone, and then we put the white net around the outside just to try and keep them at bay, which is great. Oh, lekker. That's the 2011 Savage Red. We just had a bottle of that. Someone just opened one of those. That wine was our maiden vintage, 12.5 alcohol, just light and pure. Opened a bottle the other night, and it's just looking so sharp. It's so beautiful. So some of you guys have been to the Rhone Valley. This is Eshela, or what we say in South Africa. I much prefer Eshela, sounds a bit fancy. This is Stokbay Palki, as we say in Afrikaans. And it's just a pretty epic little vineyard. This is actually not my vineyard. This is taken on a property, Johan Rupert's property. It was just an indication of what it looks like. We've got a bit of Stokbay Palki in the grill next door. The only problem with Stokbay Palki is it just puts the grapes at the right level for a guinea fowl. And the guinea fowl have realized that they don't need to jump. They don't need to look. They've just now, they see the grapes in front of them. So we've netted these, we put little skirts around these vines. And the guinea fowl have realized that they can't, it's a bit complicated in the beginning. But then these one oak, I've told some of you the story before. I didn't have my camera with me or my phone. But this guinea fowl figured out that if it just goes forwards, straight, it eventually gets to a grape. And then it just clicks it in reverse. Doesn't try and turn around, it just clicks it in reverse, pulls its face out the net. And they, through that sort of technique, managed to char everything. We only in 2020, for the first time, harvested some grapes off our Stokbay Palki section of that vineyard. And it's tiny. It's 0.008 of a hectare. So it's like farming a little row in Burgundy somewhere. But again, we're going to persevere. We are determined to make it work. But it's a pretty epic place. I don't know what the next slide is, Christine, but there's got to have there's my laborer, also known as Peter Savage. He's my dad. He does all the donkey work, like the pre-pruning and stuff. So like a team effort in this vineyard. He's a legend, man. And he retired a couple of years back, and my mother said that she's going to kill him if he doesn't get out the house. So now he comes and helps and works for me for free. It's the best employee I've ever had. He's responsible, he's honest, and he doesn't want any pay. I wish there were more of them around, but it's all good. No, it's like working with your family. I've got two girls, as you can see on this the photo over here. We wrote them in to do a bit of child labor from time to time as well. But it's quite cool, if you look at, a lot of us dream about these family setups, around the world and on little estates, all romantic and cool. But I think it's something that's quite South African as well. There's this longing to own and work a piece of land, and we haven't got to the owning part yet. We work lots of pieces of land, but to do it with your family is also quite cool. It brings a level of authenticity to, I think, what you're doing. It's very easy to, I always say, if you see a farmer and his right-hand side in South Africa, if his right-hand arm is more tanned than his left arm, then he spends a lot of time in the bucky. And you've got to be careful. Those are the farmers you've got to watch out for. So it's quite cool to get out and about and actually do the stuff, which makes a huge difference. So that's all the Jaco Engelbrecht that I spoke about earlier. Jaco's quite a passionate individual. If any of you want to know anything about viticulture, check out his website at the visual viticulture side of things. Doing a lot of cool work in South Africa, and consulted a couple of us, Iona, myself, Ibn Saadi, a few of the guys. And it's funny, we've gone on this little quest to try and find mulch. So this is Jaco with the two of us in Swellendam at the local Swellendam sawmill, trying to negotiate some of the roughest people I've ever tried to negotiate with in my life. But we still got a good price, and we got some mulch. So we cool. Wherever you end up finding a little bit of a source of something you can throw on the ground, it makes for a good thing. So
I was going to say that the people that end up buying your wine, Duncan, it's like that's one of the things they probably don't know that you have to do. Go and negotiate at a sawmill, and it's dodgy. So anyway,
I think I'm pretty dodgy too. So I think they can identify with it. So it's most of the oaks that drink the wine. I mean, just look. Is Mike on the group here? Is he around?
Tom? No, I'm not sure.
Anyway, so this is how we generally employ young maidens to foot stomp the grapes, and these are some of the. We ended up that the winery is quite close to public in the same building, and they said to me, can they come and foot stomp some grapes, or just do? They wanted to come and do a punch down. So I popped into the back and thought, geez, let me go and quickly check on what the rest of the team's doing, and I come back and here's these two ladies having a good go, and this was some Syrah with a bit of whole bunch. So they kind of thought that they were going to do a little bit of floating on top of the whole bunches. And as you can see, that didn't go too well. But they gave it a good mix. And if you happen to drink a bit of Savage Red 2020, then this was how it was made. Much better them than me. And this is also something we do a lot of, Ant and Ian. if you guys are up for it, any of you private customers out there that are listening, we very much like for you to buy lots of our wine. And then we also like you to come down to the cellar for a harvest experience that you can work like dogs. And this was Ian and Ant. You know, we had some extracurricular activities as well that were lined up that were good fun. But this was, you know, this was all part of the daytime Joel and the boys giving the Savage wine cellar floor a proper scrub, which was good. That was
it's back to that free labor again. You're actually getting it spot on. Your old man clients all free. It's brilliant.
So this is the vineyards of Mulchas that belong to David Trafford. This place is, the wines are made by Charlotte Harsbrook. You know, my father seems to think Charlotte Harsbrook's quite attractive, so he's always asking me when we're going to go fetch grapes in Mulchas again. But it's a pretty epic place, as you can see from the soil. You know, a lot of guys, I mean, DK, you said you spent some time when you grew up along the Breda River. It's a place that I haven't known that well over the years, but, you know, if you go up there, the first time I went up there, I walked on the soil, and it's a crunchy experience. You know, there's not really much soil. It's just river pebble on shale. And it's absolutely incredible. When you look at that, to answer your question earlier, Derek, about, like, you know, when one adds new sites to a range or new wines to a range, I mean, this, are we there yet? It's very much a work in progress. But when you go up to a place like this, I just went to go and check it out. I had no intention of ever making a wine from up here. And then I ended up chatting to old Dave. And I mean, Dave, as I've said to many of you before, he's just one of the nicest oaks out there. I mean, Dave, you know, he didn't initially want to sell me grapes, but it took me it took me 15 seconds to convince him that he needs to sell some grapes. So, and that's how we're there yet. And we've had an interesting up and down with the place, because obviously the droughts hit and all of that. But what we've done, I was just finishing up there this week on Monday. We've trucked in 200 cubes of mulch. That was the photo that you saw with Yaku. So we've mulched the living daylights out of these vines now. We've trucked in a lot of compost. And we're trying to, you know, see what we can make of the 2 parcels that we get from Dave. So we don't just buy generic grapes from there. We have 2 vineyards that we focus on. And it's quite lucky to be able to, it's very far, so I get a lot of speeding fines. But it's a lucky thing to be able to get out there and get away. And this photo gives you a bit of a better idea about how incredible that soil is. I mean, we've often thought we should get a vineyard planting contractor out there and tell him we want to plant 20 hectares with poles, just to see the look in his face. There's no poles going in there, I can assure you. But it's pretty epic, and you can imagine essentially a maritime growing environment. You know, so it gets a fair amount of wind off the ocean, but then a lot of heat radiated up into the vine from these stones. And you would think that in South Africa, you know, we don't really want more heat radiated up into the vines. But I think, you know, with a variety like Touriga, that's an absolute beast in its own right. You know, Touriga is not sitting in the corner, you know, sort of crying over a beer while everyone has a party. You know, Touriga standing on the table doing the down. It's that's the variety. It just wants to kind of, it sounds a bit terrible, but it's just, Touriga wants to get out there and have a good time, and it wants to show itself, you know. So trying to understand and tame Touriga is a bit of a challenge, but it's super epic. It's part of a journey, you know, with this vineyard. And Dave has just he's bottled his first Grenache off the site, and it's an absolute stonker. So if you get a chance, you must also chat to old Dave Trafford and see if you can get a little bit of that Grenache, which I think is, you know, if you look at this environment relative to the Piccaninny's Kloof and a place like Tierhoek is also a lot of these sandstone boulders, but doesn't have the shale underneath. It's more sandstone through the profile, and but similar, you know, in that heat radiating up, yet with these wines that have incredible acidity, which is just fantastic. You know, purity and acidity, which is brilliant. So that's the Mulchas thing. One thing before we talk, I mean, this is a bit of a random photo, but it just kind of shows the, you know, I have to say, drinking Guinness in a pub in Ireland, there's very few things that rival that experience. It's just I mean, there's obviously a lot of things that rival that experience, but it's bloody fantastic. I mean, we got, the first time John Seckham and I were in Ireland, we had been on the road for a long time, and we were pretty hungover. And we thought we'd just have one quick Guinness, which turned into 11. And I don't know how many of you have had 11 Guinnesses on one night before, but it's a tall order, I have to say. But yeah, we drank Guinness. Every single pub we went to, we had a Guinness in an old school pub, and it was epic. And this is again, I suppose it's relevant because Donovan and David in the photo there, and there's also Charla in the picture too. Donovan and David obviously working with Great Domains too, and this is how we traveled in Ireland. We go smoke a bit of vino and drink some Guinness, and it's really cool. That's old Eilish and Seamus in the front there who import a bit of wine into Ireland from our side of things, and it's just a great. Eilish is there. How's it, Eilish? There's a lack of camaraderie. It comes back to that dynamic of, like I've told the story of the Vintners Classic before. All of these oaks that started off as just a massive piss up, and then there's a competitive nature which comes out of all of us, and suddenly the guys are training, and you see the guys booking their. You look before the Vintners Classic. He has all these winemakers that have booked their trips to Jeffreys Bay. They keep it low key. They don't want to tell anyone because they don't want to be seen to be training or looking like they're trying to win this thing. And then everyone goes off, and you serve seriously in the day, but if you lose your heat and you fall out, then you just start dopping a bit of wine on the beach in Stillbar, which there's worse things that could happen with one in life. So, but here you've got a bunch of oaks and ladies who operate in this competitive environment, who just are bunch of mates getting on and having a good time. So it's brilliant. So. And that's the range. I mean, you can see there from our labels. I mean, most of you have had the wines before and know what the wines look like. We've got Savage Red and White. The thing I didn't talk about earlier, just a little bit of info on Savage Red. I can't believe I forgot to put photos of that farm. It's a farm called Langverwacht. Some of you might have been to a wedding or a function there. But it's a beautiful place. I've always said to people it's technically Kales River, but it's are we there yet? Yeah, no, John, that's a rookie mistake, man. You should have drank that in 10 years. No, but the thing about that property is it's in Kales River, but we don't tell too many people it's in Kales River. We tell them it's in Stellenbosch because technically it falls under the demarcation of Stellenbosch, and Stellenbosch just sounds a little sexier. But it's all decomposed granite overlooking Table Bay. And it's just the most beautiful, beautiful property. It's been farmed organically since 2006. We've got a biodynamic drive there now. We worked with Johan Reinicke, who's a flipping legend. And it's just been so cool getting to try and understand this little property of vines, mostly planted in the 90s. A lot of vines are dying, unfortunately, so we've had to replant a lot. And it's just like another project. It's a bloody expensive project, but it's if you don't do this kind of stuff, you're not relevant in the game. You need to be able to do these kind of things all the time. So it's super important.
Oh, that's very cool, Duncan. I'm just checking also the time. So two things quickly. One is that's a cool pic to almost end off on. We were talking about it today. I mean, obviously wine, the most important thing is obviously what's in the bottle and what it tastes like. But my goodness, I think one thing I can say is you've absolutely nailed your labels. I know that it's your mate, Anthony Lane, that does it, but they're special and it sums the whole thing up. And very, very cool. I thought for no other reason that everyone that doesn't know you, that pretty much sums you up, which, all the good things about the wine industry. I think why we work together. We always had that criteria with the South African people that we wanted to work with. We needed to be mates with them. We needed to like them. And then obviously we needed to love their wine. So I think to always take some of the seriousness away from wine sometimes and have a good time and basically have a guarantee of having a joel every time we see each other is hell of important in the industry. So
no, listen, just on the the association obviously with Great Domains and stuff. I mean, we've always we've always been chuffed to work with you guys, and I think to be able to be in a portfolio with the best of what the world has to offer and work with you guys has been super, super cool for us. And you guys have helped us so much with our brand in Joburg, getting to meet all these lacquer private clients that you've dealt with and all the guys in the trade. And it's been a joy, man. We do this because we love it. And I think at the end of the day, all of us we just love wine. And if you can make your life around doing something along these lines, it's just one of the most fantastic things, It's one of the great pleasures of life to be able to sit down, find wine with good friends. So it's awesome. So all the guys that came into this thing tonight, Derek initially said to me that we'll be lucky if we get 5 people. So the fact that we had a nice turnout was was pretty good, and even a few dodgy reprobates from the UK in the form of old Greg. We had a bit of class brought to the occasion by Remington joining, so thank you, Remington, for coming in. But I hope you guys all have a lucky evening.
No, Duncan, thanks, man. And listen, congrats on the wines. As we said earlier, like it's been jokes aside, a phenomenal response today to the release throughout the country, and you're leading the pack with the best. So well done, man. And we're very proud and privileged to sell and drink your wine. So thanks to you, and we're looking forward to having a nice dinner and drinking some of the stuff sometime soon. Probably Barolo with your latest avenue of interest. So we look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks for your time for doing tonight. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks, DK. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, look after yourself. Ciao, man.
Cheers, buddy. Ciao. Bye.